Welcome back to Tide Pod on the YouTube home of Tide Illustrated. Jack Knowlton, Tony Sukalis. If you're an in-depth watcher of this fair show, you'll notice I have a different backdrop because I, like the sicko I am, have already made my way up to Nashville. We're recording this here Thursday afternoon. I arrived on Wednesday. Just can't get enough of the SEC tournament. I'm so excited. It's already starting. I know Tony is too. I was watching the Ole Miss Arkansas game, which actually is kind of going down to the wire at the time we're recording this. So
it is currently 78 Arkansas, 77 Ole Miss with 50.5 seconds. I will update the pod even though it'll be over and the audience will already know. I will give us our live reaction of whenever that happens. I will interrupt or interject whenever that does go final.
So that's, of course, the 8-9 game. The winner, that's going to play Auburn on Friday. Alabama, of course, doesn't play till Friday, having had the double bye that they earned by finishing third in the SEC. They will play the winner. Like I said, we're recording Thursday here. Timing is important. So we don't yet know if Alabama will play Kentucky or Oklahoma. The two of them will play in the late game. Today, the Sooners, the 14 seed in the SEC, beat the 11 seed Georgia Bulldogs. Which I in my bracket actually picked to beat Oklahoma and Kentucky. So Georgia letting me down a little bit as the Cinderella, my Cinderella pick a little bit to go to the quarterfinal and play Alabama. But
you'd have to be really smart to pick Oklahoma, I think.
Credit to you for that one. But yeah, the Alabama will play the winner of that game at roughly 8:30. It will probably be closer to 9 if we're being realistic on the schedule here. Closer to 9 Friday night. You can catch that game, I believe, on SEC Network. So an exciting one for Alabama. Two interesting opponents, obviously Kentucky. We'll get into it at the end. Kentucky, of course, a team Alabama will be playing for the third time if they do indeed hold serve against Oklahoma. And the Sooners, of course, played Alabama to start SEC play all the way back at the beginning of January. So some good stuff to look forward to. We'll get into those. But I want to look back, Tony, because obviously we don't have the game to recap yet. We'll obviously find out if we do, if Alabama can get some wins here in Nashville. But I want to look back at kind of the regular season now that that's in the books and just kind of reflect on this wild, year for Alabama, this wild conference run, because the SEC was obviously as good as it ever has been. Alabama finishing third, some pretty great moments, obviously some ups and downs as well. But when you look back, what's your favorite game from this SEC slate that Alabama played in, whether it was a game you were at, a game you watched on TV, or just your favorite one to cover? What was your favorite from the SEC calendar in the regular season?
Look, this is going to sound so corny and like maybe recency bias, but that last one was pretty damn good. The Alabama last second against Auburn in that arena, just hearing the hush of that arena was surreal. I love going to Neville Arena. I think it's a great environment to watch basketball, and that game was back and forth the whole game. I don't know. It's hard to pick against that one. Maybe that one's just locked in my brain, but you're not gonna be able to move me past that one with a buzzer beater in a rivalry game on the road. That's just a special one. I liked the hype heading into the first Auburn game too. I thought that was a really fun experience and part of history. So that was also a good one. And then the third one I'll give you, I guess, just this one I watched on TV. I don't travel as much as you do. That Mississippi State game at Mississippi State, that was a wild game as well. So yeah.
Yeah, those are all good. I mean, the second Auburn one, of course, like I think kind of has to take it. I want to talk about a couple other games too, but that one too, in terms of how that win could age for Alabama. I mean, it puts them back on the path to the 1 seed, depending on what they do here in Nashville. It was such a, flip of a performance in terms of what they needed to do and execution. I think as a team, like getting on the glass, playing better defense, moving the ball better, all things we didn't see enough of when they played, that first game in Coleman when it was the 1 versus 2. And obviously it had the ending that can't be beat. You can't be beat on a buzzer beater. Objectively, I will throw this into objectively. Don't think you'd take this from an Alabama perspective. The Tennessee game was a phenomenal basketball game. It was high level, competitive. I had a buzzer beater too, but obviously that one's a little bit tough to throw in there given how it ended for Alabama. But I loved the Auburn game too. The other one I'll throw in that you didn't mention, Mississippi State on the road was great. I liked the hump. It was a great atmosphere. Chris Youngblood too. I wanted to ask about individual performances that stand out from this conference play, but I enjoyed Texas A&M on the road a lot. I thought that was a really good performance. It was gritty. They beat them on the glass, which obviously A&M, like, that's their kind of whole identity, and that's what they define their team by. And Alabama won that battle. There was the moment of LeBaron at the end where he's waving off the Aggie crowd, the student section, as they're leaving. That was the game for me that kind of cemented they had that swagger on the road. That Mississippi State game was another example of that too. But I'll throw the Texas A&M game as another example.
And then if we're only in SEC play, right?
Yes, I mean, you can feel free. You can throw
that's fine
ones in there.
But one more, I guess, just to complete all the good SEC games. The road at Rupp, the road game at Rupp, where it's just a shootout. I like myself a good shootout. So yeah, that was fun as well.
Very high level offensive game, for sure in that one. That was fun. Also, I don't know if you want to give the people an Ole Miss update, but I threw the game on my phone. It was wild ending.
There's a good chance that I'm watching it live.
Here you go. Let's get this reaction.
For 3. Oh, onions.
Sean Padula, the Rebels, who beat Alabama, of course.
Yeah. Oh my God, they almost made Arkansas almost made it from half court.
Yep. Wild ending in Nashville. See, this is why you go to the SEC tournament.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Wild stuff. So there you go. You got our live reaction. That won't be live for you guys, but there you go.
I mean, I thought I wanted to wait, and I should have known that you would have told me because I'm way behind. But the shot from Arkansas from half court almost banked in.
Yeah,
even more. I almost thought that's what was going to happen, but no.
So Ole Miss will play Auburn, of course, number 1 overall seed.
For and another game that I picked. Big win for Tide Pod hero Malik Dia, who finished with 19 points and 8 rebounds to go with 3 steals.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a good enough segue, right? If you want to talk about like best individual performances, not for Alabama, but against Alabama. I mean, that Ole Miss game, I think Alabama's grown a lot from that game, but Malik Dia, he's not a name anyone in Coleman Coliseum that evening will soon forget, because he put his stamp on Alabama there.
Regardless, regardless if we were doing Alabama or opponents, I would pick Malik Dia. 23 points, 19 rebounds, 2 blocks. Didn't have a turnover. Only had 2 fouls. He shot 11 of 21. He did attempt 3 threes. He missed them all, but over 31 minutes, that guy was just absolutely stellar. It's easily his best game. He's a person, though. I'm telling you right now, I'm kind of hoping that that Nate Oats is a listener of Tide Pod. Maybe maybe he could, because I'd love to see Malik Dia play for Alabama if he's, or maybe he doesn't want to leave Ole Miss, but he'd be a guy that I think just as a role player on Alabama could be a guy off the bench that I think could be a very useful player.
Yeah, for sure. He was fun. That's the best individual performance against Alabama. Let's get that one out of the way.
Hold on. Like, there's a contender. I mean, obviously, Eagle Staff. If we're just seeing SEC, because Eagle Staff, you could contend had a better game.
Well, Eagle Staff.
Actually, a lot of people have had good games against Alabama.
Frankly, Janai Broom too in that last game. I mean, set his career high. I think that was part of the strat for Alabama to kind of best Auburn by just letting him score, stopping other people. But for Alabama, Tony, what individual performances do you remember that maybe, whether they were unexpected, you don't remember, or like you weren't expecting insert guy to do this? What performances come to mind when you're going to reflect on this regular season SEC slate for Alabama?
Yeah, I don't know why the Grant Nelson against Kentucky, because I think he needed it so much. That was a big one. They're not. I should have done my homework heading into this segment. I'm trying to kind of remember some of the key ones. Mark had a very good game against. What was the game that Mark had all those assists? He's had
a couple double doubles this during conference play. The one
I really like just as a pure basketball. I liked his 21. This is not the best. This is not the answer, but like one of the ones that stood out was during that 111-73 win in Coleman against Mississippi State, where he had 21 points and 10 assists. I thought like that is the way, like that is Mark Sears at his peak level. Was it necessarily his? I actually probably feel all in all that was his best game. He only had 3 turnovers in that game. Yep. He got 21 and 10 in less than 30 minutes. He was 5 of 12 from 3. I think that might be his. No, he had 6 threes against South Dakota State, but like one of his best, one of his highest 3-point totals of the season. I think he just did everything. He distributed the ball well. That's a game that's maybe not like the sexiest on the stat sheet as much, but I really enjoyed seeing him play that kind of pure basketball.
Yeah, that's a very good Mark game. I think that is probably my favorite Mark game. The whole stretch, of course, to end the regular season, he was just kind of on another level. I mean, he dropped 24 and 9 against Kentucky. Obviously, like Grant Nelson kind of went cold in the second half, and he sort of took the mantle. And that's like the difference for me for Mark Sears is just kind of the complete playerness of it. I mean, his heroics against Auburn were great, but it's the fact that he had kind of 7 assists there, and he was, just on he's able to make an impact in kind of a different way, and I think that's a really important distinction for him this year, and how it's kind of helped Alabama. My mind went to a couple of like LeBaron Philon games. I mean, he was just phenomenal. Like he had some cold streaks in SEC play, but when he kind of came back against Texas, had the 15.6 assists. I mean, he's been really good to end the year as well. I mean, Auburn, just some of the steals he gets, just re-solidifying that he's an NBA player. I just love what he does from like a two-way. I mean, honestly, my favorite from him is probably not even the offensive stuff, but it's the 5 steals against Tennessee. It was just unbelievable to watch him set the tone against a Zakai Ziegler and a Chaz Linear, 2 good offensive guards for as regarded as Tennessee is as a defensive team. Those guys can score, and Philon absolutely took pride in that. I thought he was awesome in that game. Him, like I said, against A&M, played pretty well. He only had 8 points, but he had 7 rebounds, or 7 assists, and 6 rebounds, 2 steals. Like just being the do-it-all guy. He's just so much fun to watch. I've loved LeBaron Philon.
If we're venturing out from SEC play, I really enjoyed the Mo Diabate 10-point, 16 rebound game against Houston.
That was a great one.
Where he just outmuscled them. You know what I'm saying? And I'm looking back at the stats. He had 3 blocks, I think, in that game too. So like he was just that was probably that's the best game of his career so far. And I think that was a fun game too, just because it was like the emergence of Mo D. We had seen some good performances from him, but we still probably felt like, he's a role player. Is he going to really play when it comes to conference play? And that game was, I think one of the times that he really early on announced himself, and you knew he was going to be a menace in SEC play as well. Just he's one of the core players of this team that maybe you didn't think he was going to be that, but turns out he was.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, it sort of was that Houston game, and then the switch was fully flipped, I think, from there. He's had some great performances. I want to talk about Mo D in a minute too when we talk about some of this postseason stuff. The other 2 I will throw in there, Tony, is Aiden Sherrill against Georgia, the 12.7 rebounds, 2 of 3 from 3. I know he was great against Auburn, but that's the performance a little bit further back that I remember too. Was kind of a big breakout game from him. And then the other one I want to throw in is another blowout win for Alabama, but it was still, I think, good to see this guy get his. Jaron Stevenson, 22 points, 7 of 8 from the field, 4 rebounds against Texas. That was a big game. He was pretty good after that. He's been pretty good after that. Nate Oats, at least shooting the ball. Nate Oats talked about his 3-point shooting, but that one was pretty good to see and awesome. I think satisfying for him.
Just to get another name in there, Aiden Holloway is 22 points against Vanderbilt. He shot 4 of 6 from 3. That was really the time that kind of like from then on, you started to see him become more of a factor in the offense, and they started getting him more threes. He had 4 threes in that game, and then 3 in the next 2 games, and that's when he started really hitting everything. Against Vanderbilt, if he was 8 of 11 from the floor, 4 of 6 from deep, he had 22 points. Like that was kind of talk about coming out parties. I mean, he had double digits plenty of times before that, but that was a big one, I think, for him.
Yeah.
Kind of like, the second half resurgence for, I thought that was big for him.
Yeah, that was just kind of a sneaky Vanderbilt team. Everyone was like, they can turn you over and do these things, and and Holloway just torch them. And then we'd be remiss if we didn't just say Chris Youngblood versus Mississippi State. Take your pick. I mean, 27 the second time, 22 the first time. There is something about those Bulldogs uniforms, which Alabama would play them in the semifinal if some wild stuff happens. And they go on a little bit of a run. So maybe a third, if the Bulldogs are going to run, it could be a third chance for Chris to do something against Mississippi State. But those two performances were heroic. I mean, Grant hitting the corner three in that road Mississippi State game. The more I think about this, as we keep doing this, the more that road Mississippi State game continues to stand on my mind. That was such a
they almost lost. They came a miss away from losing it. Yeah.
But it was Mark going from a turnover where he threw out of bounds to hitting a two and then finding Grant for that three. Grant having the confidence to shoot a corner three where sometimes he doesn't. Cliff's ghost block at the end of the game where it was actually just Mississippi State missing the layup. That was great. I mean, there were some good moments in that, and Chris just taking over was fine. So a lot of good. Speaking of kind of player, just player eval, so to speak. We talked to Nate Oats on Wednesday, and he was kind of asked, a question that I think we can continue parlaying here as we get into SEC tournament play. He was kind of asked who he wanted to see step up. I think Alabama's trending. A lot of guys are trending in a lot of good directions, but Tony, I know you wrote about it. What did Nate say? Who did he say needed to step up here in the postseason now after we reflect on all those great performances? Who did he say needed to step up in the postseason? Do you agree? Would you add any other names to that list in terms of guys you're looking for? Kind of a loaded one for you, but what did Nate say about that?
I mean, like he really kind of mentioned three different players, but I think the player you're alluding to would be Jaron Stevenson. Yeah, Jaron's, since, I guess being bumped from the starting lineup, Jaron's just kind of not been a factor on offense. He's been a big defensive player, and he was key in that Auburn game just from a defensive standpoint. But he's a guy that his offensive numbers have kind of fallen out. And really, when you look at it, I had it in the story. He's not shooting bad during the so over the last 6 games, that's when he was bumped out. He's averaging 4.7 points and 3.7 rebounds, but he's 9 of 16 from the floor and 6 of 11 from deep. I think really what Nate Oats is saying is that like they need to maybe create more for him, and he needs to kind of maybe do more a little bit. We saw I think Alabama is at its best when they have, whether it's, Mo D, whether it's Grant Nelson. It'd be nice if it could also be Jaron Stevenson, one of their fours driving to the lane. I think that Nate Oats probably wants, Jaron Stevenson to be a little bit more aggressive. Also, if you're shooting 54% from three and you have a shot, take it. I mean, like if you're shooting that well, it's we've come a long way since Jaron just couldn't buy a three. If he's got an open shot, he needs to take it, and Alabama needs to, to maybe find him some open shots. But yeah, he's a guy that I think with his defense, if you could get him going with some of the other momentum, we've seen Aiden Sherrill play well. Obviously, you mentioned LeBaron Philon's coming on, like that, that kind of like that trio of kind of role players, if they can continue to step up their game, it puts Alabama on a whole different level. The other people that I would say Nate mentioned the other day would be Mo Diabate. He's kind of had a few sleepy games. I think Alabama's still really confident in him, but he's kind of a guy that needs to wake up again in the postseason. And then Aiden Holloway, he had been such a scoring machine. I think he's gone three straight games without, or I guess 2 straight games without double digits. But before that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games in double digits, and really these last 2 games, he's been a non-factor. He's had 3 points against Florida, 1 of 5 shooting, 1 of 4 from beyond the arc. Against Auburn in overtime, he only played 16 minutes. He had 5 points, 2 of 5 shooting, 1 of 3 from beyond the arc. He's not getting a mess load of assists like he can. He's just really a non-factor in both of those games. You look, it's not too long ago that, he was scoring 19 points off the bench against Kentucky, or, he had an 18-6 against Auburn No, sorry, an 18-6 against Texas on the road. I mean, that's he's definitely a player that can do that. I personally feel that Aiden Holloway will be Alabama's best player next season. So he's definitely a big time player, kind of in a scenario with the same kind of thing that Mo D is in, where I think we know what Alabama can get from him. It's just a matter of him waking up and being more aggressive in the postseason.
Yeah, Mo D and Jaron are interesting to me because when I watched Jaron, the last couple of games, I kind of got the same impression as I did with Grant before that Auburn game, where the effort wasn't not there. I think Jaron wants to do the right thing and tries to, and that keeps him on the floor. I think especially defensively when he's able to impact the game the way he can. I think that's what kind of keeps him out there. But yeah, it's just kind of about, and it sort of goes the same way with Aiden Holloway. Now I think, and Nate Oats said this, I think Aiden Holloway needs to improve a little bit defensively when he's going to be out there, especially with those 3 guard lineups, just because you give up a little bit of size. You need to have a little bit better on-ball defense. But I think with both him and Jaron, it's just kind of about both of them being aggressive. I mean, Aiden Holloway took 5 shots against both Florida and Auburn. That's the least amount of field goals he's attempted in a game in SEC play. So he's normally a little bit, he's taking a little bit more volume. Now I think Florida and Auburn both deserve some credit for that. They have good defenses. They can stop good, on-ball guys. And frankly, because of Alabama's guard depth, if you're going to focus so much on stopping Aiden Holloway, it's probably going to turn into points for a LeBaron Philon, a Mark Sears, as it did against Auburn and Florida. Chris Youngblood too. I think is another guy that can benefit from that. But I would like to see Aiden Holloway drive more. He hasn't taken a free throw in the last 2 games. I think that was kind of the part of what makes him exciting and what gives him the potential, Tony, that you said to be this team's best player is that sort of multi-level scoring. He's got the nice floater. He's got good touch around the rim. I think he needs to be a little bit more willing to go put his head down and get fouled. I think that will help Alabama. And then Jaron, same thing. It's just being a little more aggressive offensively. But I do think he is taking advantage of his shooting opportunities when he gets them open. He just probably needs to shoot a little bit more, frankly. And then I think the defensive stuff with him is fine. Then, yeah, Mo is – I don't know. I've always had this feeling with Mo when we've heard about him from Nate is that it's like a locked into the scouting report thing. He just needs to keep kind of games in perspective, and he plays with such an energy. I think sometimes he can maybe – is there an almost getting too lost into the game where he just kind of forgets maybe what he's supposed to be doing scout-wise? I don't know. I know that's been a big theme for Nate this year, but that's kind of my take on those 3. But I think you're absolutely right. If they're all firing on all cylinders, Alabama can absolutely beat anybody. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on those.
The point about Aiden and the free throws, I didn't actually realize that he didn't have any in the last 2 games. I mean, it makes sense. He didn't really play as much as he normally does. But, yeah, he actually hasn't made a free throw in the month of March because if you remember, he, uncharacteristically went 0 for 3 against Tennessee from the line. So,
yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's definitely something they're going to have to get because I think as a pure point guard, he's probably the best pure point guard. Oh, I mean, there was a time I think Mark's starting to play a little bit better as a point guard, but there was a time this season where I would have argued that Aiden Holloway was the best pure point guard on the team. So yeah,
the interesting thing to surmise it all together is what you asked Nate Oats about, where it's there is still sort of a ceiling to hit here. The issue is. Now the ceiling, hitting that ceiling comes down, it's down to your season. Right. It's not all right, can we get him going in the next 5 games? You don't have that anymore. So that leash or that leeway or that runway is gone. I mean, everyone's kind of got to click here now. We've seen what happens in the occasions where it has, but it has to, in the postseason or Alabama won't get to where it wants to get to. So yeah, those role players are all going to be big. I mean, it's who is going to have the Mo Diabate Grand Canyon game. Someone is going to have. They have plenty of candidates. So who's gonna do it? I think is the big thing.
We saw how good hypothetical Alabama can be in the football season. But that doesn't wins. Hypothetical Alabama could also be really good in basketball, but no one's interested in that if they can't put together a run in the tournament.
Exactly. It's you got to put it down. And I from a team perspective, though, we talk about some individuals we want to see step up. When you look at the trends of this team from a positive standpoint, what is the best thing you've seen over this maybe last backstretch of SEC play, and the thing you want maybe Alabama to keep leaning into that's going to help them propel them further than for sure where they got last year in the SEC tournament, and maybe propel them a little bit more in the NCAA tournament.
I don't know if this is necessarily the best thing that they've been doing, but I've really appreciated the emergence of Aiden Sherrill. He's a guy that didn't even play, if you remember, in the Auburn game, and he is starting to really find his own. He's a guy that sorry, he didn't play in the first Auburn game, my bad. But since then, his last 6 games, he's a guy that's been really good. I haven't really even noticed, not like, I guess there hasn't been a drop off anymore, or there's becoming less and less of a drop off when Cliff leaves the court and Aiden comes on, and I think that's huge for Alabama, especially when and if you get into a situation where Cliff gets into foul trouble or in a tournament setting, like especially in this SEC tournament, like if you can't, you're going to have to balance those two. You can't overexert those guys if you're going to try to win 3 games in 3 days. So having a guy that you can come in and really handle the 5 position the way he has, I think it's just, that is a big deal. And I think, you talk about like what Mo Diabate did in the Grand Canyon game. I think that Sherrill could maybe have that at one point in the tournament where, maybe he does a double-double in a game that you just weren't expecting him to have. And over these last 6 games, so since the first Auburn game where he didn't play, he's averaging 5.2 points and 2.3 rebounds over just 9.5 minutes per game. So he's coming in, he's making a big impact. He's shooting 78.6 from the floor. Most of that, a lot of that is, right by the basket, but he's also 4 of 7 from beyond the arc. Do I feel super comfortable with Aiden Sherrill shooting a 3-point shot? Not really. But, I mean, he has shown the ability to knock them down.
Yeah, I think to I guess, piggyback off that from a strength standpoint. I mean, I think you're right. I think there has been less of a drop-off. I think that's going to be big in games where you saw against Auburn where Cliff runs into foul trouble and you can turn to this guy for extended minutes and let him go one-on-one. And I think what that is also going to help you with is an area I really like where they've been trending in is the rebounding. I think the rebounding, and literally from Florida to Auburn, I think it was good against Tennessee too. There was a little bit of a hiccup in between. I think defensive rebounding in particular has been big for this team. It's not an elite defense. I mean, they're, I think it's like 32 is the last I saw in KenPom in defensive efficiency. They don't turn teams over a ton. They don't block a ton of shots. And, Nate Oats kind of talked about that with Cliff, where he's not in the Big Ten anymore. It's not as, I think he called it it's a lot less like grimy. There's not as much play into the paint. It's a little bit more open. And I think that's part of why Cliff's block numbers aren't as high as they were at Rutgers. All that to say, I think, and having a guy like Sherrill on top of that helps. They defend by forcing misses, and then they do not allow second chances. I think that's when Alabama is at its best, is when it is stopping opponents. It's one stop and they've got the ball back. They're able to run in transition so much more when they're defensive rebounding and not taking the ball out of the net. So I think it's that for me, a lot of the defense to offense stuff with the rebounding. And I think Sherrill is a big part of that. I agree with you. And yeah, anything he can give you upside wise as a potential stretch 5. There was the one play where, he sets a really good screen and he had Janai Broom on him and Janai Broom kind of blitzed Mark Sears and Sherrill just slipped right through it, had an open dunk because Janai had to play so high. He couldn't drop on Aiden Sherrill because Sherrill can pick and pop and shoot the 3. So yeah, it gives your offense another added element. And then I think the rebounding for me is my most positive trend. I think they've been rebounding the ball really well, at least in 2 of their last 3 games. I won't say that for Florida. I'm going to ask you if you agree with this, because on the other side of the coin, I look at trends in terms of what kind of is concerning me for Alabama heading into the postseason. For me, I think there's a couple things you could point to, but I want to ask you if you agree. For me, it's free throw shooting. I think this team could get itself into some real big jeopardy with free throw shooting. They have been well under 70% in the last 3 games. They have lost 2 of those last 3 games. They lost both of those 2 games by a combined 8 points. And they missed close to 8 free throws in both of those games. The only reason it wasn't a factor against Auburn was because Auburn shot 64% from the line and Alabama shot 66. To me, I thought this was a big issue when we entered conference play. I think it is still a big issue, and I think the fact they have been that bad in the last 3 games if you play a really good team again, like an Auburn, a Tennessee, a Florida in the SEC tournament, or you play a good NCAA tournament team, that is going to be the difference for you at some point or another. You have to make your free throws. That's the biggest issue for me that they're trending down right now.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one. I would say too, obviously it's tough to say this following a buzzer beater win, but they haven't been closing halves well. I still think I don't like the way they closed the first half against Auburn. They were able
agree
to,
with you.
it wasn't great. They did better in the second half, and obviously they, were able to win it in overtime. But I'm not totally convinced that they're done with that problem. And you start playing against these teams, the SEC tournament. I mean, they're not going to play against a bad team. They might get a couple of easy games, maybe just one in the NCAA tournament. But then you're facing tough teams. You're going to have those clutch moments, whether it's putting a team away at the half or getting rid of some momentum at the half, or when you get down and deep into the tournament, you're going to have to put teams away. You're going to be in battles. Even if Alabama earns a number 1 seed, they're going to be in battles with teams. So they're going to need to execute better. I think, you can really build off the Auburn finish, and maybe that gives them a little bit more confidence. A lot of that, I think it comes down to confidence. If you see yourself do the end of game scenarios and they work, then you have more confidence. When you start having multiple bad halves or end of halves, I think it gets in your head in those late moments, and you just start thinking about not messing up compared to executing. So it's a big momentum builder, but I still think that's a potential flaw of this team that could really be frustrating and really be heartbreaking too, because you look at what happened against Tennessee. Alabama should have won that game, and it can be a learning mess. It can be a learning opportunity during the season. You do one of those in the tournament, your whole season's over. So and what a terrible way that would be to end your season on. So I think they really got to fix that.
Yeah, it's such a big momentum thing too. Like I feel like the cliche you always hear is like how teams play out of timeouts. Like you always hear about good out of timeout teams that can drop a set and score really quick. Alabama, it's like the opposite effect. But yeah, it's letting Jordan Gainey run coast to coast. All of a sudden, Tennessee's up 1 in a game you were up 4 less than a minute ago. That completely, obviously, no games are on the road in the NCAA tournament. They're all neutral sites technically, but like it's a game that just completely flipped the momentum against Tennessee. And yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm still a little worried about it. The Auburn game they were winning, but they had an ugly last possession where Mark Sears just kind of gets stuck with the ball in his hands and then blocked by Denver Jones. And
really, they had a chance to lose the Auburn game before all of that. I know a lot of Auburn fans are upset with the shot that Janai Broome settled with when he was up against Grant Nelson, where he kind of took that mid-range shot. I think Nate Oats would have probably strangled him if he was an Alabama player, just because that would have drove him nuts. But if Janai goes to the rim, does he get a foul?
Right.
Especially with that environment, and if it was any bit close, does he draw a foul? He probably hits at least one of those free throws, probably both. And then Alabama probably throws up a prayer and doesn't get it, and then Auburn comes out with the win. So yeah, it's not like they were excellent. Now they did get the stop, but I think some of that, I don't want to take away Grant's defense on that play. I thought he locked down well, and against the best player in the nation, I thought that was a big moment for him. But at the same hand, I think if Janai plays that a little bit smarter, that Auburn probably wins, and then we're talking about another late game, meltdown for Alabama.
Yeah, it's the little things, right? And I think for me, when I go back to the free throw stuff, it's they're Alabama to me. Like I feel like the big one that people always go to is like turnovers and them turning the ball over too much. Of course, you can't turn the ball over 20 times against good teams, but frankly, Alabama hasn't. And like for one, and then two, they had 6 turnovers against Florida and lost that game. They had 13 turnovers against Auburn and won. They had 6 turnovers against Auburn the first time and lost. I think Alabama with the turnover stuff has found kind of a balance. I've said this before of being they've found the kind of in between of being too cautious or too careless. So I actually like that part of it doesn't worry me. I think they want to be moving the ball. They want to be getting out in transition, playing up tempo. And obviously, yeah, you can't be coughing the ball up 20 times. You can't play sloppy. But I kind of think they've turned the corner there. And for me, I'm less worried about something like that versus something like, how you versus like improving the end of half stuff, not turning it over with 30 seconds left up one at the end of the first half, and not missing your free throws. I think I'm more worried about those two things from a trends perspective as we head into postseason. So I think you're right there, but will be interesting to see if they kind of remedy it here. Especially from the free throw line. Again, it's your season now, so you either got to do it or you're going to be sitting on the couch. Before you want to be. If you're Alabama, let's talk about that from an SEC tournament perspective, because of course Alabama was not in Nashville, Tennessee for very long last year. Lost in the quarterfinal game to Florida. Might have to play Florida again. I figured we could do some eval, like we said at the top. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon, so we don't yet know if it'll be Oklahoma or Kentucky for Alabama, the 6 or 14 seed, who they'll play in the quarterfinals. But Tony, you look at that, they'll play the winner of that game. Then they'll play Florida in the semifinals. If the seeds hold, if something crazy happens, they could play a Missouri again. They could potentially play Mississippi State for a third time. They're already probably going to play Kentucky for a third time. And then the final is, could be any number of teams. So when I guess you look at that path to the final, is there a team that concerns you, whether it's as easy as it's Florida, or as is it a Mississippi State going on a little insanity run here as the 10 seed and maybe playing Alabama, hard to beat the same team 3 times? Feel free to use that argument. You can use that with Kentucky too.
I was going to say Kentucky. I mean, they're a team that can do
that. How do you evaluate Alabama's path here?
Yeah, look, once again, we're doing this podcast before the Thursday night game, but I think most of us on this podcast, I'll go ahead and make a projection that Kentucky.
Would you say half of us on the podcast think Kentucky's going to win?
Yeah, well, you picked Georgia, that's gone, but I think I think that Kentucky is going to win that game. I do think that Alabama has a good shot at Kentucky, just because one rest. You know what I'm saying? Like that part of getting the bye is that you don't have to play the day before, and this will be Kentucky. Well, that will be Kentucky's second straight game. I think Alabama's got a really deep roster. I think that they could probably wear down at Kentucky, and that's probably going to become a shootout. I don't think Kentucky really has the defense to contain Alabama, and then that defense. If you're a team that struggles with defense, it's not going to get any better the second day you have to play in a row. You're not just going to defense is one of those things for a non-defensive team that's going to wear down because it's going to require the extra effort that you're not going to have because you're a little bit worn down. I'm not going to say Kentucky can't play 2 games in a row. All these people can play 2 games in a row. They can play 3 or 4 games in a row. But I think that will advantage Alabama. The game, and I think probably the game of the tournament will be Alabama and Florida. I think there's a good chance that those 2 teams are playing for a number 1 seed. And that's an interesting matchup. I think I'd go with Florida, but I when you look at it, I know the game was in Coleman, but I think Alabama had plenty of chances to beat Florida. We talked about people that I mentioned Aiden Sherrill as somebody that could have a big moment. He had a good game against Florida. That was one of his better games. So maybe,
it was a shame that he got knocked out of it when he did. He had 10 points in 10 minutes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so maybe that's the secret sauce against the Gators. So you don't know. And then, like you said, something crazy could happen. Missouri is a team that can get hot from 3. Maybe they do that against Florida and they knock out. I mean, look, if we're talking about teams that Alabama struggled against, I know that it was on the road against Missouri, and I know there were circumstances that went into it, but Missouri thumped Alabama, and maybe they have the magic over Alabama. I would say though that Florida Alabama game is the game I'm looking forward to. I think obviously that's the hardest. I'd argue that's just as hard or harder than playing Auburn again in the final. So it's that's going to be a big one for Alabama for sure.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Like when I just look from a pure opponent perspective, Missouri and Mississippi State, either one of them to go in there and knock out Florida would be quite the turnaround, given how both those 2 teams are absolutely sputtering heading into the SEC tournament. So if you're looking for an upset, Alabama fans, I don't know how confident I'd feel about either of those teams playing Florida. One of them has to, but this is March. Anything can happen. But you're right. I mean, it's the rematch against Florida will be really intriguing because I think as much as I thought Nate kind of contradicted himself after that Florida game where he said it was kind of an effort thing, but also said he didn't think his team wasn't giving effort, just didn't quite have the pop. As much as I didn't love that, I did see, when watching that game, it was, if they rebounded the ball the way they did against Auburn, against Florida, I think they probably would have been able to come away with that game. If they would have made more than 68% of their free throws, they would have come away with the win in that game. So, it was not as stark of a loss as it probably wasn't as stark of a loss as it probably looked in terms of how far off these two teams are from one another. So when I look at that rematch, I'm interested. Listen, I'll go to bat for the Sooners and Wildcats for a second here. In the last month of the season, Kentucky is 14th in Bart Torvik. They similar to Ken Pom, they measured the same stuff, and they've improved in defensive efficiency. They're not going to have Jackson Robinson haven't had him for a few weeks now. He's out for the season. He's their kind of second leading scorer. So their offense has suffered a little bit, but their defense has actually come up. They've won 3 of their last 4. They could definitely hurt some people. Oklahoma, a little bit weirder. They're the 17th best offense in the last month, but 113th in defensive efficiency. So if you talk about a game that could just turn into a shootout, they really don't have that much size. No offense to former Tide legend Mohamed Wage. I just am not confident that Oklahoma would probably, especially if it is going to be like a Sherelle thing. If they play Alabama, I think Alabama's just kind of going to outmuscle them. I foresee that going similar to how the January 4th game went in Coleman, if anyone can remember back to that long ago. But yeah, I like Alabama's path for sure, the semifinal, and I don't think the Florida game is as stark, or was as stark as it maybe looked at times. I think they can compete with them if they're giving a little bit, better effort, frankly. And obviously that'll be tough coming off you play the night before, but so did Florida. So we'll see. We'll see how it pans out for Alabama. I mean, any other postseason thoughts, Tony, run wise, lingering things before Alabama starts this?
I think we covered it, and I'm just interested to see how the rest of this tournament plays out. I'll be there for Friday. I know you're already there. So enjoy the basketball. I'll catch up on Friday, probably with Alabama, Kentucky, but maybe Alabama, Oklahoma.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I will be watching very intently the Oklahoma-Kentucky game tonight. We'll see how the Sooners can kind of do against Kentucky. But yeah, I don't see Oklahoma winning it, but I saw Georgia winning it, and Oklahoma beat them. So it's March, folks. It's March. But yeah, Alabama will play, like I said, that game at around 8:30 as the number 3 seed against either Kentucky or Oklahoma. You'll know when you're listening to this. My prediction, Kentucky. I think Tony's prediction, Kentucky. And we will see how it goes against Big Blue Nation if that is indeed the case. We'll have plenty of coverage of the game Friday, so subscribe to Tide Illustrated there. We've got a bunch of stuff already on the site from talking to Nate on Wednesday and all that stuff. And then next week, obviously, tournament time, football will come back. They'll be back from spring break, so we'll have coverage coming from spring practice as well. So plenty to strap in for. Subscribe here in the YouTube if you're watching. Give us a follow on Spotify if you're listening along to the show. We'll see you next time.